Payday hits, and for about 6 hours, maybe a day if you're lucky, your bank account actually looks okay. You see the number, and there's this small, quiet exhale, like, okay, we're fine. And then, almost in slow motion, it starts. The rent comes out, the car payment, the utilities, the subscriptions you keep meaning to cancel, the credit card minimum, the grocery run you couldn't put off any longer. And by the time the dust settles, sometimes within 72 hours of getting paid, you're already back to watching your balance like it's a countdown clock instead of a financial foundation. And the worst part, you've been here before. You'll probably be here again next month and the month after that. My name is Threk, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial cycles, and why so many intelligent, capable, hard-working people find themselves trapped in the same monthly loop for years, not because they're doing something obviously wrong, but because the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle is a specific kind of trap with its own logic, its own gravity, and almost no one ever explains how it actually works or how to escape it. That's what this is about. Not generic budgeting tips, not spend less on coffee, but the real mechanical and psychological reasons why the cycle keeps repeating and the specific things that break it permanently instead of just temporarily. Let's start at the beginning, which is that the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle isn't primarily a math problem. That's the thing that surprises people most when I say it. They assume they're stuck because they don't earn enough. And sometimes that's true. There are real income constraints that make financial breathing room genuinely hard to create. But for a huge number of people, the cycle persists even when income rises. They earn more, and somehow the cycle just scales up with them. The expenses expand, the lifestyle adjusts, the math stays the same, just with bigger numbers. So if it's not purely a math problem, what is it? It's a systems problem. The cycle persists because there's no system in place to interrupt it. And without interruption, income flowing in will always find expenses to flow out to. It's almost thermodynamic in that way. Money in motion stays in motion until something redirects it. The first thing that actually breaks the cycle is something called a buffer. And I want to spend real time on this because it's the least glamorous and most important piece of the whole puzzle. A buffer is a small amount of money, even just a few $100s, that sits between you and the cycle. It's not an emergency fund. It's not savings. It's a cushion between your income and your expenses that means you're never literally running on empty between paychecks. The reason the cycle feels so inescapable for most people is that it operates with zero slack. Every dollar has a job the moment it arrives, and when one unexpected thing happens, a slightly higher bill, a small car issue, a timing mismatch between when something is due and when you get paid, there's nothing to absorb it. The buffer absorbs it. Even $500 sitting untouched in a separate account changes the psychological experience of your finances entirely. You stop white-knuckling your bank balance. You stop the small panic spirals. And paradoxically, having that buffer makes it easier to stop spending reflexively, because the financial anxiety that drives a lot of that spending starts to quiet down. The second piece is understanding why the cycle is self-reinforcing on a psychological level. There's a pattern that happens when money is chronically tight that researchers have actually studied. It's called scarcity mindset, and it does something specific to decision-making. When you're in scarcity, your brain narrows its focus to the immediate problem. How do I get through this week? How do I cover this bill? And that tunnel vision, while useful for short-term survival, actively makes long-term planning harder. You're not making bad decisions because you're bad with money. You're making short-term decisions because your financial situation is demanding short-term thinking. And the cruel part of the cycle is that living paycheck to paycheck creates exactly the mental environment that makes it hardest to escape. The stress of scarcity consumes the cognitive bandwidth you'd need to plan your way out. Understanding this doesn't solve it immediately, but it reframes the self-blame. The cycle is hard to escape, Not because you're bad with money, it's hard to escape because the experience of being in it makes escaping harder. Third thing, and this one's about the actual mechanics of getting out, not just understanding the trap. The single most effective behavioral intervention for the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle is paying yourself first. And I know that phrase gets thrown around so casually it's lost most of its weight, so let me explain what it actually means in practice. It means that before any bill gets paid, before any expense gets covered, a small amount, even $20, even $50, gets moved into a separate account automatically on payday. Not what's left over at the end of the month, not the surplus you're hoping exists, the first dollars that come in. Because here's the brutal truth about waiting until the end of the month to save. The end of the month never has money in it. The expenses always find it first. Paying yourself first removes the decision from the environment where the decision is hardest to make and puts it on autopilot before your brain has a chance to redirect that money somewhere more immediately satisfying. The number doesn't matter as much as the habit. $20 a month is not going to change your life financially, but $20 a month on autopilot builds the neurological and behavioral infrastructure for 50, then 100, then meaningful amounts. You're training the system, not just moving money. Fourth, this is something I think about a lot when it comes to people who've been in the cycle for several years. There's a moment, usually after a few cycles of trying to budget, failing, trying again, feeling guilty, and then giving up, where the belief forms that this is just how things are, that financial tightness is a permanent feature of life rather than a temporary condition with an exit. And once that belief solidifies, it starts operating like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Why build a buffer when you'll just have to spend it? Why automate savings when something always comes up? That fatalism isn't laziness, it's the reasonable conclusion of someone who's tried conventional advice and found it doesn't stick in the real conditions of their actual life. But the belief is wrong, not because motivation and hard work fix everything. They don't, we already talked about that, but because the cycle genuinely does have mechanical exits, and those exits work regardless of whether you believe in them, as long as you execute them. The cycle breaks not because your mindset shifts first. Sometimes the mindset shifts because the cycle broke, and you finally have evidence that things can be different. The paycheck-to-paycheck cycle is not a character flaw. It's a structural trap that millions of people are inside right now, quietly ashamed of something that is largely a systems failure rather than a personal one. The system, the way income arrives, expenses are timed, and financial education is or isn't provided, creates the conditions for this cycle. You didn't design those conditions, but you can change how you respond to them. Build the buffer first, even a small one. Pay yourself before the expenses do. Interrupt the automatic flow just once, and then again, and then make it automatic so you don't have to keep choosing it under pressure. Understand that the stress you feel inside the cycle is part of the cycle. It's not a sign that you're failing, it's a symptom of a system running without interruption. You're not bad with money. You're working with a system that was never designed in your favor, and now at least you can see the system clearly enough to start changing it. That's where it starts, not with more income, not with a perfect budget, not with a complete financial overhaul, with one small interruption to a cycle that has been running on autopilot for too long. One buffer, one automatic transfer, 1 month that ends differently than the last one. That's enough to begin.